Ever been to a board game or tabletop convention? Maybe you've been to Gen Con. Maybe you've just been to Essen. Well, you know what? I've been to neither of those because I live so far away in a place called Australia. Our nearest tabletop big convention, I would probably say, is in Melbourne, known as Pax. It's a combination of tabletop and digital gaming all converging annually at a single place at the Melbourne Exhibition Centre. Today, I'm going to be going through what board games I encountered. I'm going to be able to share some of the cool stories and experiences that I had whilst I was down there, as well as share with you some of my favourite games that I packed Tetris style into my luggage and brought back home. Hi, my name's Danny. I'm an avid modern board gamer from Australia. I love sharing my passion for board gaming with you, my friends and family. Come and join me on this journey. So this year I traveled down to Victoria with my husband, and we actually kind of paired this Pax Australia trip with like a little mini getaway. We actually headed over to the Mornington Peninsula, and if you don't know the Mornington Peninsula, it's kind of got this one side which is kind of enclosed in this bay area with beautiful, pristine, turquoise blue water, and on the other side you've kind of got this rough ocean which kind of has this rugged coastline. And basically people go there to get away. There's a really cool popular thermal hot spring there where there's about 50 thermal pools. They even had this thermal pool with like a cave. The water was like 40 degrees, and they even had this amazing like thermal pool at the top of a cliff. And when you sat in this thermal pool, you could kind of look around at all the scenery and the green countryside. And we had the most beautiful weather, a really great Airbnb stay. Our Airbnb had this beautiful like glass room. And I know later in this video I'm going to insert a clip that will talk a little bit about my experience there. So on the way down to the Mornington Peninsula, we drove past a game shop. Well, I actively searched for a game shop, and we ended up in a place called Gameology. And Gameology is a board game online store that actually has two warehouses, one in Brunswick and one in Clayton. We went to the smaller of the two, and I thought, you know what? We're on our way to the Mornington Peninsula. Why don't we just stop there and see what we find? And you know, I often go into these kind of little board game focused trips with an idea of trying to at least get one big game. And I know my hubby said, you know what, we should just bring an empty suitcase because you're going to probably buy games. And he bet that I was going to bring back 4 board games. Boy, was he wrong. As soon as I walked into this Gameology store, I was like, there's going to be way more than 4 fitting into that suitcase. First game that really caught my eye was this big, mega deluxe version of a game that I've actually was so surprised to see on the shelf, because it was a game that was in my top 3 most anticipated games of 2024, and it's a card game about playing wildlife into different habitats using different habitat tags, and it is a game called Kavango, and this is the deluxe edition where the boards themselves allow you to tuck the cards in. You've got different animeeple player markers that you move around, and you've even got like a recessed cube tracks where you can kind of signify how you're contributing your funds to different wildlife conservation techniques. And what I love about Kavango is its message of conservation, the idea that you're protecting these animals. And Kavango is a region in Africa which is kind of like the corner point of 4 or 5 other African countries. You've got Victoria Falls as part of one of the major draw card features in this region of Africa. I think the highest number of elephants in Africa also residing in these national parks. This is such a beautiful game, and I almost actually do want to open it for. And so here you've got this beautiful map of Kavango with Namibia, Angola, Zambia, and Zimbabwe and Botswana all converging onto this beautiful national preserved nature reserve, where you've got a huge wide diversity of geographical, geological, and wildlife biodiversity features in this region. And basically what you're doing in the game is you're playing and tucking cards. It's kind of like a card drafting game, similar to Wingspan in some respects. And each round, it plays across 3 rounds. You've got a certain combination of A, B, and C cards. And the A cards are kind of like habitat cards where you tuck the icons at the top of your board. And then the B and C cards are more the animal species cards. And some of the cards have lots of cool information about them. And you've also got action cards that help to kind of shape up and reshape how you place these cards out. You even get little cubes to put on little tracks that kind of signifies your collective contribution to the conservation fund, and also the longevity and protection of these animals in Kavango. You've also got these cool expert cards that kind of invites a little bit of asymmetry into the game. And in fact, it's been described like a meld between Wingspan and Meadow, if you've played Meadow as well. So the next game that I saw in Gameology, I ended up walking away with 2 games in fact. And Gameology is a very well organized online store, but also very organized physical store. They kind of had like a Halloween theme section, new game section, cooperative games, thematic games. And the other game I got was purely based, I guess, on the art. I had seen this game a while ago, but then when I looked it up on BGG, I wasn't really quite happy with, I guess, its rating. And I think I'm starting to find that I'm at a point in the board gaming hobby where I'm not really too fussed about the BGG rating. I used to have this kind of expectation that if I buy a game, it's got to at least be a 7 or higher. But now I'm still even finding that fun games that I truly enjoy, that are not always entirely well polished, but ones that actually have a nice place in my collection, and they're rated, you know, 6.5, 6.7. It's a very entry gateway game level where you're building a tableau of 10 building cards, and basically as you're building cards, you're putting citizens, or you're building 3 different types of residential buildings, and you're building a variety of different landmarks. The landmarks have love heart symbols, which kind of like represents like how much the citizens love those buildings or places. And then you've also got residential areas which can house people. And so what you're trying to do is collect different types of colored buildings, which then allows you to get these really special buildings. And if you're playing the expert mode, these special buildings have like special powers that kind of modifies your engine or your economic engine to help you build other buildings. And basically, just like in games like Race for the Galaxy, once you build 10 buildings, that kind of triggers the end of the game. And to get your victory points, what you do is you sum up all of the hearts that you have in your tableau and all of the residents that you have in your tableau and multiply them together to get your final points. What's really interesting about this game is how you draft the cards. Kind of like in Machikoro 2, where you've got like different building costs. So the buildings are kind of categorized in 3 different tiers based on their expense. And on your turn, you're going to reveal cards until there's 3 only available. So you might choose to reveal one from the, you know, the lower cost deck and one from the higher cost deck. So basically, once you've got 3 of you, then draft it. And so the players are determining the expense of the buildings that are out there and how many of each expense there is. So you might have a round where everyone's trying to get high expense buildings, and by doing that, you're limiting the lower end options for the other players. Or everyone's just going for cheap buildings, so people are just going to reveal all the cheap building cards. So it kind of creates this, or simulates this fluctuating real estate market, which I think even for this cool art alone, I know it's a re-implementation of an older game, but this is just super adorable and I love it. After the first day of being there, my hubby actually got sick. In fact, he, I think, contracted, it wasn't COVID, but it was some sort of illness from, I think, someone else on the plane. And the rest of his trip was basically staying at Airbnbs and not really leaving to go anywhere. So I kind of had to act as Uber delivery driver, but also try and find ways to look after my hubby, as well as still not kind of waste the opportunity of seeing the beautiful sights. So when we headed into Melbourne City to experience PAX, I kind of went alone, but I was warmly greeted by other people that I knew from PAX and other board game conventions that I'd seen on previous years. I want to say a huge shout out to Hogs from the Bangers Project, who I actually literally bumped into. In fact, on the Friday afternoon when I went to PAX, I was in a board game shop, and my main aim on the Friday afternoon was to basically go board game shopping. I really had like this whole plan of just looking at all the games, trying to find any games that I couldn't get back home, or games that might be rare, or brand new games that I didn't know were going to be released there. And I'm literally walking back from this shelf and I bump into Hogs from Board Games Bangers Project, and basically we hung out for the whole afternoon going board game shopping. In fact, it was kind of like a nerd fandom boredom moment where we were like, oh my gosh, we can shop together. And we literally just went on a shopping spree and bought a ton of games, played a lot of cool games, some which I picked up along the way. So one of the stores that I really wanted to go to first was one called Ori Game. And if you've heard of games like Remember Our Trip or Come Sail Away, Daryl Chow is a Singaporean game designer who has designed actually quite a lot of really family-friendly, approachable games that have a really easy rule set, but a really cool, interesting twist and depth to his games. And so that was one of the first stalls I had to go to, because his Singaporean games are quite hard to get here unless you're actually going to be paying a lot of shipping. And the fact that he came last year with a small bunch of games, I got Buffet Boss last year, and now he's brought over 2 new games plus a plethora of the catalogue of his other games to Australia. And I was like, you know what? I'm not leaving without buying almost all of them, because I really love supporting international and local board game designers. And so because I am part Malaysian, part Vietnamese, part Chinese, you know, this is part of my culture, part of my heritage, and I also feel really connected as well, because I think one year I went to Singapore with my dad and I was sitting on the train, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can hear people speaking in Teochew, and I was like, oh my god, people know how to speak this language, and it's not like Cantonese or Mandarin. One of the first 2 games, I was like, I'm getting that one and that one, are 2 games that actually released by Ori Game this year at Essen. A game called chock-a-block. And in Australia, we have this expression where when we say chock-a-block, we mean like tightly packed, or it's really busy. For example, we might say at Christmas time, the car park was chock-a-block full of customers. We're saying it was completely full. Now, in Singapore and lots of parts of Asia, lots of people live in apartment block buildings where when you look out through the balcony, you can see the buildings on the other side, and you can see into other people's homes. People will have their clothes hung up or plants on the balcony, and it kind of gives you like a window into people's lives. And chock-a-block kind of captures the essence of looking into other people's windows, looking into other lives, and trying to find some synergy between them. And in the game, it's basically like a card laying game where you're building an array of 4x3 cards, and each card has like 4 little segments, and each segment represents like a dwelling. And you've got 4 different colors, and you're trying to connect those colors together. In addition to that, you're also trying to connect different features like lazy flowers or cats or underwear. And basically when you connect those, you can get these little resident cards and place them over little empty squares where people aren't currently living, and you can kind of connect them and chain them together. Cube Melt, which actually comes in this kind of like tiny cute cube. And basically it's a dice majority game where you're playing the role of an ice cube, trying not to melt. And basically you're trying to gain happiness in form of hearts, as well as adventure points in the form of stars. And you'll be rolling these 6 super cute, unique dice. And as you roll the dice, the majority of the dice icons that you put aside are going to affect the players to your left or right. So you can kind of force the players to your left and right to melt, whilst you kind of can gain fame and adventure points by selecting the dice that you want to keep. And then on their turn, they're trying to advance their adventure and heart markers, whilst also impacting your ability to stay frozen. It's a beautiful game, and I've actually even decided that I'd use the lid as a dice shaker box to play the game. It's super cute, and I'm really a big fan of compact games. These have very limited shelf space, and they can be stacked together and just displayed together so well. Oh my gosh, I got so many games. This is a game called Master Sensei, which basically is encompassed around a theme of gathering Chinese herbal medicine and treating different ailments. It's a very interactive game where you basically need to prescribe the right herbs and give them to the patients to try and help them get better. And I think this game really hit home for me because when I was a kid and I was sick, my parents would often take me to the Chinese herbal medicine store. They would get the person to weigh out different herbs, especially when I was feeling really, really ill. This sort of game really encompassed that story and that feeling of being a kid and the taste, literally, as soon as I saw the cover of this, I was like, oh my God, it reminded me of how awful Chinese medicine really tastes. So, you know, it was just a game that I definitely wanted to pick up and try. Next game I got, and it is signed by the one and only Daryl Chow himself. It's a game called The Secret Flower Garden. In fact, it's a game that he was giving away based on, I guess, how many games you could buy. And The Secret Flower Garden is basically a very simple cooperative flower deduction game where players will have certain cards face down and certain cards face up with questions on them in their hand, and then a single card that's been removed that players have to try and deduce throughout the game. And basically players are going to be playing cards from their hand, and then players are going to be answering the questions on these cards by rotating them. There's like different answers like purple, white, yellow, and based on the answers, players have to collectively kind of deduce through teamwork and using the other players' hints, which is the secret flower from each game. Kind of has like a Cluedo-esque vibe to it, but encompassed in this beautiful Singaporean floral theme. Basically, this store was called Cheeky Parrot Games, and they're actually a New Zealand-based company that do really small card games. And as I was walking past this one stall, I was like, I really like that. I love the look of it. It had this kind of cool IKEA card game kind of esque vibe to it, where you could kind of lay cards out, splay them on top of each other, and kind of create your own decorative rooms. And the game is called Alterior Design. And so basically what you're doing, it's a competitive game where you're trying to add to the decor to your room by adding plants, paintings, lights, and fixtures. And every so often, when you open a door card, there will be a particular feature that will get judged. It might be the number of plants, it might be the number of lamps, it might be the number of all the items combined together. And whichever player in their tableau matches that judge the best, they get a little gold token. And so on your turn, you can either add to your tableau, or you can cover up or add to another player's tableau, and that kind of hinders their ability to meet a particular scoring objective. Or you can add to the central row, which is kind of like what's in trending. So for example, if you think, the art judge is going to come up very soon, I might add a few art paintings into the middle, you can do it. And then that way, when you build up your tableau of paintings in your house, you can get that point. So it's kind of got this interesting card interaction where you can lay things on top of each other, cover or reveal things, and basically trying to meet an ever-changing goal objective in the middle. And the fact that you don't know when these judges appear, because there's cards in there that reshuffle the deck, it kind of adds this element of, you know what, maybe I should contribute to the trend. Maybe I should put my blank card over certain items in the trend so that I match better than the other players. And so it's got an interesting twist to it. And as I spoke to one of the people that was teaching the game, a lot of their games have a nice little cheeky twist to it. I did play another game called Flipology, which was kind of more animal based, and you can kind of create little combos of flipping your cards over. And that was an interesting game itself, although not enough for me to kind of like entice me to get it. Next game I got was one that was high on my to get list, and I kind of had an inkling that it would be at Pax Australia because my Clash games last year had Septima that was also at Pax Australia, which I did get and I did enjoy quite a lot, although a little bit convoluted. And this was a game which is basically a two-player asymmetric game where one player plays as the wood tribe, and the other player plays as the Iron People, and hence it's aptly named Ironwood, all even down to the look of the pieces on the game board. The Iron player has these cool metal cities and metal drill, and there's like little metal armies, whereas the Wood player has wooden totems and wooden army pieces. And it's basically an asymmetric card game where the Iron player is basically trying to build 6 iron cities around the perimeter of the forest, and the Wood people are trying to summon 3 totems from empty, unoccupied iron cities and pull those totems to the edge of the forest. Whichever player can do that first wins the game. And what's really interesting about this is that there's a lot of card play. You can play 3 cards per round, and each of the card kind of interacts with what you can do with the board. It might be drawing extra vision cards, because the Wood player actually has secret locations that they're trying to get to, and so you can kind of pretend to go one direction but actually summon the totem in another direction. And as the Iron player, you're getting crystals, you're drilling the environment to use these crystals to then use to spend on other cards and other abilities. And so this asymmetric yin and yang of interesting interactions, card play, as well as combat. There's this interesting combat mechanism where you have to spend a card from your hand to either defend and attack the other player. And then there's a little flag symbol which allows you to push the other player into an adjacent region. It just has this multi-level card playing effect, which I really, really love. And it actually reminded me of another game that I really like in my collection called Haven. There was another game which was absolutely hot. In fact, I did not think I'd be able to get a copy of this because it was super popular at Essen. It was all over social media. A lot of people were raving about how much better this version of the game was to its predecessor. And the game is The Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth, a re-implementation of Seven Wonders Duel, which I own and really, really love. And as soon as I heard about it, I literally said to Hogs, "Have you seen Lord of the Rings Duel?" He's like, "You know what? I have. I saw it on a shelf," and we hightailed it into a particular game shop at Pax, and there it was. I got it, and the box actually is a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like probably 2/3 of the size. And what's really cool about this game, it's a card drafting game, but as you go through the 3 different chapters, there are 3 different victory conditions. You've got this cool, clear perspex tracks where the Nazgul are chasing Frodo and Sam as they try and get the ring to Mordor. You've got this area control mechanism where you're placing troops and towers to try and vie for influence. You're then getting these little shields that have different abilities. You're drafting cards, some that are face up and face down, and those shields will give you extra powers and bonuses. And then you've also got little location cards that kind of help you to vie for your victory. This is a game that I've heard is incredibly tense. The idea of the interaction between being chased down the ring track and having this area control and getting the right symbols is just something that, whilst sounds abstract, really works for this Lord of the Rings theme. And the Vincent Dutrait really just takes this to another level. And the fact that this was such a cheap game to buy, and yet the components in this game are super high quality, just made it a must get. And I really, really love this version of it. And I'm not sure I'm gonna keep the original Seven Wonders Duel, because I think this one looks and feels a little bit more palatable and feels like almost like a 2.0 version of the game. Probably the last game that I got on the Friday, and it was basically a game that I was like, there is no way I'm getting this game. I've seen enough pictures, lots of people have taken photos of it, people described the gameplay, it looked on BGG, people were like, you know what, this game is not as good as it was. And so I thought, you know what, how about Hogs and I, we sit down for a demo and then let's get a little test play. And then we can decide if we want to spend money. And I always am an advocate for testing a game out. And if you're going to a convention, one of my tips is basically go and play the game at the game table before you go to the shop and spend your hard-earned money, so to see whether you like the game or not. And another tip, which I'll also say, is If there's a game that you want to learn to play, but you don't have the time to read the rulebook and you're at the convention, you might as well also go and sit at the game table if there's a spot and learn how to play, so you don't have to go home and try and decipher all of the rules. Having someone explain the game to you, who's there explaining the game multiple times a day, is far more easier to learn than trying to trawl through a 20-page rulebook. But yeah, we actually sat down for a game of River Valley Glassworks. I thought, you know what? I love the cute Andrew Bosley art, but I kind of thought this game was going to be like an Azul 2.0. I was like, yeah, you're drafting little glass beads, you're putting them on your board with a less interesting look to each board. Yeah, how possibly would I need this in my collection? And then we sat down to play and I was like, Hogs, we are buying this game as soon as this game is over. And there were a couple of reasons why. First of all, this game has that sense where it finishes slightly earlier than you'd like it to. You just kind of have this grand plan of completing all these rows, because if you can complete a full row, you get like 22 points. And then you're also trying to complete really tall towers. Not all of the glass beads, the colors, are the same proportion. There's some that are rarer than others and some that are more common than others. So if you start in the first column with a rare one, it will be hard to finish the rows. If you start with a common one at the beginning, you might be able to create multiple rows. And then whether you can get those rare ones out onto your board is also another issue in itself. There's also more beads that can actually, that are in the game that actually fit on the board. So there's lots of different bead types, which means if you get a pile of beads that has a bead type which is one that you've already used or you've filled up your board, then it can overflow and cause you negative points at the end of the game. And so in some ways, I do like the idea of picking these beads, and it's so incredibly tactile. When you hold these beads, you're like, now I know why this game is so satisfying. I just love completing the rows, completing the columns, because you only get a point, you only get to score your two tallest columns. And if they're tied, you can only score the leftmost column, which is actually worth less than the rightmost column. So whilst the scoring sounds a little bit tricky, it's actually not that hard to get your head around. And when you play this game, it's always important to be like, okay, how do I score first? Because when we played, we kind of got explained the scoring at the end, and by that time we kind of already like played half an hour into the game. As I flipped each of the playboards over, this game includes a solo mode where there are 5 different boards with 5 different ways to play. There's ones that push the glass around, there's ones where you're playing as the otters and you're building a dam and all the glass beads are collecting at the end. When I saw the solo mode, I was like, oh dang, the solo mode is way better than even just competitive mode. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have to get this for the solo mode, because I can totally see myself playing through the 5 different scenarios and seeing the variability in the different boards and just really enjoying playing this after dinner. So on the Saturday, which was kind of the day where the tickets for PAX actually sold out, I headed back over to the Melbourne Convention Centre to explore more games, because I realized my luggage actually could fit a whole lot more games than I had purchased. So I was like, you know what? Let's see if I can get some more Ori games. So I really was keen to head back to Ori games. I got to check out Overparked, which is kind of like a cool polyomino tile kind of placement game where you're trying to put all the different vehicles into a parking lot. And then I picked up some more of Daryl Chow's games. And the first game was a game that I really wanted to get last year at PAX, but I was sitting on the plane on the way back and I thought, wow, why didn't I get that game? I really, really liked the look and feel of it, because it's a game that kind of represents a time of the year where you buy these cakes to celebrate the Moon Festival. And the game is called Mooncake Master. And what's interesting about this game is that you get all of these mooncake cards and you're creating mooncakes just by placing 4 of these cards together. And you're trying to satisfy different customer objectives, and you're trying to build 3 mooncakes, and by the end of the game, whoever satisfies the scoring criteria the best wins the game. And so the interesting twist to Mooncake Master is the fact that when you're passing the cards around, you draw 3 cards, you keep 1 that you think will benefit yourself, and then you'll pass the other 2 cards that you don't want, one to the person on your left and one to the person on your right. And so there's a high level of interactive decision making where you're like, you know what? Do I want to give the person on my right the one that can make the egg yolk, or do I want to pass this green mooncake to the one on my left? Because it might hinder their ability to score. And so you're left with an interesting mishmash of different flavored and different mooncakes with different compositions. And you're really trying to like suss out the competition as to, you know, who's got the best mooncakes and who will satisfy the requirements the best. And so, because it's such a small box game and quite highly interactive, and the idea of sharing mooncakes, because I don't know about you, but mooncakes are actually really high in cholesterol. They're so high in fat, I would never eat a whole mooncake. In fact, it is so dense that I only eat like a sliver of mooncake, and you know, a quarter of a mooncake is enough for me per moon festival. So yeah, you'll know once you've tried mooncakes just how incredibly rich they can be. They're not like sponge cakes that you can just eat like the whole thing all in one go. Then another game that I really wanted to get was a game called Plantopia, where you're basically growing all of these whimsical looking different types of plants. You're strategizing and trying to make your plants grow, and this particular one came with like a seed pack, which had all these like other different like plant species, getting different abilities with special powers, and you got all these cool little plant cards that, yeah, you've got violet, you've got buttercup, you've got tulips. It's basically, get it? Tulips. Natural flowers, and they all have special powers and abilities. So yeah, this is definitely one I really want to try. I've really, in recent years, really enjoyed collecting small box Asian designed games. And so games like this, I know I often won't be able to get elsewhere because of where they come from, but also how they play. I've also picked up a game called Oh My Orchids. Okay, it's all about gathering the different types of plant seeds and orchids, and then outwitting your fellow gardeners to build the best garden. It is a beautiful box game, which kind of has all these little seed things that you use to grow your orchids. And the final game that I got from Ori Games is Alpha Beasts Attack. Now, it might sound like a bit of a strange looking game where you're combating, except it's actually a word game. In fact, it's a play on the word alphabet, alpha beast. And so each beast in this game is a different letter, and then you've got different letters laid out in front of you with different rules, and you have to come up with words that uses the cards in front of you to kind of defeat the beast. So making words that begin with A but end with L but have a double vowel in it. If you can do that, you can knock off some of the cards in front of you. So these alpha beasts with different alphabet abilities. I'm a huge fan of word games. In fact, one of my favorite games is Letter Jam. This definitely sounds like my jam, a beast jam, in fact. Now, the last game that I got at the convention, before I talk about some of the experiences that I had, is a game that I'd been looking for ages. And if you've been following my channel, you'll know that I've been talking about Stefan Feld a lot. Marrakesh, I've got a new version of Castles of Burgundy. I love Bora Bora, which I managed to find secondhand finally after I missed out locally here on Facebook Marketplace. I was like, you know what? Really want the version of Bora Bora rather than the Queen's version, just because I liked the original Polynesian theme. And then I was browsing this board game store on the Saturday morning, and I looked down and I was like, there is this Stefan Feld game I've been looking for a long time. In fact, I was so tempted to buy the second-hand version of this game from America, which would have cost a lot of money, and it's definitely now out of print. And it is a dice game called The Oracle of Delphi. It's more of a racing style game, and if you know a lot of Stefan Feld games, they're more like puzzly, they're very point salad-y, and there's a lot of conversion and lots of tiles and lots of really interesting crunchy choices and lots of maneuvering parts. Whereas this one, I think, is more about racing to complete like 12 different objectives. It's got this interesting like dice action mechanism. I'm a bit of a collector and I am a bit more on the side of Team Feld versus Team Uwe Rosenberg, and I'll get to Uwe Rosenberg very soon. But yeah, this was one that I was so glad to pick up because it's just kind of beefed out my Stefan Feld collection. And yeah, I was just like, oh my goodness, the whole trip, the whole journey was worth it just to get Oracle of Delphi. So in terms of the game experiences down at PAX, there was a lot going on in the tabletop hall. In fact, I heard that the tabletop hall actually maxed out in terms of its space capacity. They had games like Sea Salt and Paper, Landmarks. They were showcasing Yokohama. Those were some of the games that I think were quite popular. Then there were some games that had been brought over by from Essen. They were demoing a table of SETI as well as Daitoshi, and they were even playing Zuvardis as well as Phil Walker Harding's Cities. Some of the games that I managed to play, I got to play in a game of Kakaa, which was a very old Phil Walker Harding game, and it really surprised me because I thought this game was going to be like Carcassonne because it's got these little square tiles. And so I ended up calling this game Cacao-Cassone because just of the similarities of the way it looks, but actually the gameplay was completely different. You basically have these little village tiles, the little meeples printed on the edge, and you place the tiles and you're kind of doing this in this checker pattern to kind of trigger and activate previous tiles to get cacao, to get money, to then trade the cacao in, and to move up this little river track. And so it surprised me at actually how different from Carcassonne it felt. And so I just called it Cacao-Cassone, and I actually really enjoyed it. So I'd probably give Cacao a 3 out of 4. It definitely has a few little areas where it could be a little bit more interesting. The game kind of felt quite short for 2 players, but still a very fun and unique experience. Another game we played was a giant version of Harmonies. Basically, Harmonies is this abstract game where you're collecting all these kind of terrain discs and you're trying to deploy animals out from these animal cards, and they had the largest version of Harmonies I'd ever seen. In fact, I think I even had a photo of, for size comparison, my coffee cup compared to the size of the pieces, and I was just thinking, oh my goodness, how are they packing this game away? Because the bag in which all of the little terrain pieces came in was like this massive fabric bag that you had to kind of like dig in and shuffle around and get them all out. It was one of the most popular demoed games there just because of its size, and we were all talking like, basically, once you've played this sized game, you're not going to go back to the original because of just how satisfying it is to pull a giant cube and plonk it onto this mat and just really see. The other thing was, it was really hard to see what anyone else was doing because it was so far away. Like, you literally had to stand up and like reach out and be like, hey, what are you doing over there? What animal card have you got? And they even made these little cardboard animal cards to put instead of the, because in the game you usually put cubes instead of animals, and so you could put these animals on top, and it just added to this beautiful fun table presence, and anyone who walked past was looking at this game. Another game we played was Mlem, which is basically a game about cats launching rockets into space, going to different planets and trying to explore. And so basically each player had 8 cats, each cat had a different ability, and each turn one person would be the captain, and people would choose a cat with a special ability to go on the rocket. And basically it was a dice rolling game where you're rolling the dice and using the values to move the rocket up this really long windy track. And at different points in the game you could decide to disembark and get off, or stay on and push your luck. And if you stayed on and obviously you went bust, you wouldn't get anything. But if you decided to get off early, you could get victory points. There's this area majority thing when you went on to different planets, and your cat ability allowed you to negate some of the negative effects of the game. It might allow you to go up 1 spot or down 1 spot, or it could allow you to get a parachute so that you can land somewhere that you just passed if the rocket goes bust. I don't think I particularly enjoyed that particular game because I'm not really much of a push your luck game. Another game I got to play was a game called Planet, which was basically a 3D version of Cascadia, and I think it came out maybe a little bit before Cascadia, where basically you've got all of these different rows of little magnetic tiles, and you've got these scoring cards. And each round you get to pick a magnetic tile, put it on your, I guess it's called a dodecahedron, which represents the planet, and then you evaluate your scoring. And so people get the card based on who satisfies that requirement the best. It might be the most number of ocean spaces touching a desert space. And so whoever has that on that particular round gets it. And if someone ties, that card gets placed down at the bottom and it gets scored again later on. And so whoever has the most points at the end of the game, based on the number of scoring cards that you acquire across the 12 rounds, as well as your secret terrain card, that person wins the game. It turns out I'm not very spatially aware, especially on a 3D scale. I did so poorly in this game, and I thought, you know what? Everyone else is doing so much better. I'm definitely going to come last. And you know what? It turned out I didn't come last. I came second. And so I was like, how did that happen? It just wasn't a game where I could see everything well. And because you're constantly rolling this and rotating this dodecahedron, it's really hard to like visualize how all the things connect together. I do like seeing my tiles flat on a flat surface. It just makes it easier to navigate. And then the setup of this seemed a little bit more convoluted than it needed to be. There was one game that I got to demo in the collaboratory, which I think was called Spell Words, which basically was a game where you're playing cards from your hand. If you can say words that match the letters that were out in front, matching with a letter combo in your hand. And so it might have been a 4-letter word that begins with W but ends with D. And so if you could say it and play the card, you get rid of it. It was a card shedding game. And it was really great for Tian to come over, who's the game's designer, to come over to me and actually say, hey, I really want to show you this game and talk to you about how this plays. I want to really share this passion with you. And I think the one thing about PAX that's really amazing is being able to connect with Australian game designers. And so when I see international designers like Daryl Chow, but then also Australian upcoming game designers, it just really warms my heart, because I really want to highlight how talented a lot of our Australian game designers are. The Australian board gaming designer community is a well-connected one, but it's a very small one. And you know, if we can get more people interested in tabletop gaming, board game design, then I can already see from the 2 years that I've been to PAX how much this hobby has grown. And so I thought I might include a little clip of Tian, who's from Adelaide, showing me his games. This vlog.
Set up, deal 7 cards to each player to play a card. All you need to do is say a movie, TV show, anime, game book that has whatever's in the center card and whatever's you're trying to play. A sword god and a race.
Like in a...
Is there a race in Bruce Almighty?
Let's go. A god and a parrot. Hercules. Yep.
I got it.
After it's played, it becomes a new center card.
It doesn't have to be both the god and the parrot.
There's no turn on it.
I see.
Jump in and play whenever you want.
Oh, it is literally the same.
But different knowledge.
Oh, nice.
First person to play all your cards.
Okay. No, I'm joking.
Off the Magic Dragon.
You done?
Jesus. Pirate. Oh, you said pirate.
Peter Pan.
Yes.
Fantasy Islands.
What?
Like, isn't there a movie called Fantasy Island?
Yeah, there is.
Fantasy in Holland, it works.
Thanks for showing me the game, and yeah, I had a great time playing your new game, Videography, and yeah, I hope your game goes well and I hope to see it on a game store soon. Also want to say a huge thank you to people that came up to say hi to me or thank me for making videos from my lounge room. It was really warming to be able to meet you in person, be able to chat to you and say hello. I also want to say a huge thank you to Hogs. I really enjoyed hanging out with you across the weekend, the 2 days at PAX. I also want to thank Britta, you know, Games Australia and VR Distribution have always been really supportive of this channel. I really enjoy working with you. And also Meeple University. Stella, thanks for finding me behind the taco truck. And just like popping out saying, hi Danny, how are you? And also to Ree. I just so very much enjoyed playing games with you. If you want to check out Ree's Instagram page, I'll leave it in the description box below. I just really thoroughly enjoyed connecting with people who watch the channel and also the other content creators from Australia who just really want to share how fantastically beautiful this hobby is and it really actually absolutely still, I can't comprehend that we can have these friendships and these connections with people we only see once, possibly twice a year, but some reason we all just really gel and understand each other and just connect on a really deep level. And it really just makes this hobby so much more enjoyable to know that we have really good people out there that just can celebrate tabletop gaming here in Australia. So what did you think of my PAX Australia haul? Were there some games on there that you hadn't seen before, or are there certain games on there that you were surprised to see? Please let me know some of your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Have you been to some of the other conventions? If you can share some stories, I'd love to hear your experiences, as this helps us to build a great sense of community, and our community here is great. If you really enjoyed this video and love my wholesome board game content, consider subscribing and watching the other videos on my channel. Otherwise, head over to my Patreon page and watch some exclusive Patreon-only videos there. This is Danny signing out. I hope to bring you another board game video in the near future. See you soon.